The Congress of the United States needs to address this problem in law. It needs to address what I'm going to show you in law as well, and there's something you can do about that, and that's the bill that we filed, which adds to the list of injurious species the Burmese python. Now, let me tell you how bad this has become in the Florida Everglades. These snakes that people import into this country and buy as pets, a Burmese python can grow as much as 7 feet in 1 year. And so they get them as these little bitty snakes, and then they get too big, and people release them. And they are so prolific. As a matter of fact, in an environment like the Florida Everglades, that, by the way, the United States government is spending a lot of money, along with the state of Florida, to reform the Florida Everglades from the diking and draining that had occurred for the last 3/4 of a century. And now we're allowing a species to take over that's at the top of the food chain, that all of the natural species that are in the Florida Everglades that we're restoring back to what Mother Nature intended, all of that native species is being thwarted. For example, they found that this snake has swam across the ocean to Key Largo. It's the top key in the chain of the Florida Keys. And there they found in the belly of one of these snakes the endangered Key Largo wood rat. They have found in these snakes a full-grown Florida deer. They have found a full-grown Florida bobcat. It is just a matter of time until they find the very endangered Florida panther. And as you can see by the size of this critter, you can see that this one, being probably 16, 17 feet, what they do is they have fangs that have fish hooks on them. And their modus operandi, since you can't see them, they will lie in wait perfectly still for their prey. They then strike and grab their prey with their fangs, which, because it has a barb on the end, the prey cannot pull away, and then immediately wrap their constrictor body around the prey and then suffocate their prey to death. And unfortunately, the worst happened last week in Florida. A pet Burmese python, only 8 feet long, not this long, slithered out of its glass cage, and in the middle of the night, worked its way up into the baby crib, attached its fangs to the head of a 2-year-old child, wrapped its body around the child, and strangled the child to death. This happened in Sumter County, which is to the west of Orlando, to the north of Tampa. And it's just a matter of time before one of these snakes get to a visitor in the Florida Everglades. Mr. Chairman, I have had the superintendent of the Everglades Park tell me they now estimate that these snakes have proliferated to the tune of 150,000 in the Florida Everglades National Park. And the reason they're so prolific is that they killed a 16-footer, a female, and inside of her were 56 eggs ready to hatch. So you see how it has become such an invasive species, and it is taking over anything that is natural to the Florida Everglades. Now, fortunately, at the end of May, we took Secretary Salazar down to the Everglades, took him out in an airboat. He got to see this natural phenomenon called the river of grass. But before we took the tour in the airboat, we brought, this is a 16-footer. You can't see the body. You can see Secretary Salazar here looking at this snake. This snake is about as large as this one. And you see the power. It took 3 men to hold that snake, and that snake was not hungry. You can see the power. The middle of that snake, of this one, the middle of him is this big around, and it's all muscle. And you've heard the phrase, a pig in a python, with the hump in the middle of the snake. That's exactly what they do. Once they have suffocated their prey to death, then these jaws separate and they ingest the whole prey, and the body expands. And that's where the phrase, the pig and the python, came from. There's only one in the food chain, there's only one predator that is higher than this, and that's the alligator. But that's only a very large alligator. We have had a 12-foot python attack an 8-foot alligator. And they thrashed around in the water for 30 hours right off of the headquarters of the national park in the Florida Everglades. We have found a 6-foot alligator inside of a python. Here again, this is only a 6-footer, and you can see what they look like against St. Augustine grass. But when these critters get into the natural swampy conditions, you can't find them. They had captured one. They put an electronic chip in one, and so they tracked it. And they had the electronic antenna saying the snake is right there. And all the biologists standing around, they could not see the snake. That's how difficult they are. Now, what I'm going to enter into the record, with your permission, is a 10-page document that will detail the number of python attacks on human beings in the last 10 years. And I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, it has been 17, and 7 people have died as a result of the attack. So not only do we have a species that is threatening to humans, and the superintendent of the park told me one day, he's never experienced anything like this. They saw a python starting to come across the road out in the park. And he said his attention was diverted momentarily, and he turned around and the python was right in front of him. They moved that quickly. So, endangerment to humans, especially endangerment to the natural ecological phenomenon of what Mother Nature intended because of this snake going after all the other prey. And ultimately, changing the very nature of something that we're trying to return to what Mother Nature intended, and that's the Florida Everglades. And I would close with this. This snake coming out of Burma, all it knows is it likes moist, humid climates. this is not restricted just to the south end of the peninsula of Florida. This snake, if it continues to proliferate, you're going to find it all over the southern United States. And that's all the way, and the biologists will tell you as they testify, there are conditions in California and all across the Sun Belt that are conditions for this snake to prosper in. So as you look at these invasive species, and there are plenty of others, you all have mentioned, I would add the Brazilian pepper plant and the Nile monitor lizards are other invasive species. We've got to have the ability to stop it. Now, because we have the problem in Florida, I have been asking the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service administratively to do something about the import. And for 3 years, they have not. They said that they're studying it. And I'm hopeful now under Undersecretary Tom Strickland, who was down there with us, I'm hopeful that they're going to administratively get into it. But you can do something about it, Mr. Chairman, by a one-word change in the law and restricting it to not all of the constrictor snakes, but to this particular one. And that would be the help that we need to address this problem.